The rising tide. The dam's valves responded with a deep, echoing groan as I slowly turned the wheel. The water responded instantly, writhing like a living thing, creeping out from the lake's depths to invade Crestwood shores. The first trickles turned into a steady flow, like the opening of a dam of fury I had carefully prepared. I watched from my vantage point on the hill, binoculars in hand, as the water began to lap at the edges of their manicured lawns. In the distance, I saw their pristine houses, each one a mirror of the last, standing helpless as the lake's wrath crept forward. Pamela's garden, her prized roses began to drown beneath the rising flood. Their grand gazebo, the centerpiece of their social gatherings, was swallowed by a slow-moving tide. I could almost hear their frantic whispers, their hurried calls, but I stayed silent. Patience, I told myself, patience was part of the plan. The morning sun broke through the fog, casting a pale light over the chaos I was orchestrating. It was beautiful in its own dark way, the way water, uncontrollable and relentless, was rewriting the landscape. I knew this would send shockwaves through Crestwood shores. The residents, so used to their rules and their illusions of control, wouldn't understand what hit them. I had prepared for this moment. My grandfather's dam wasn't just a relic, it was a weapon, a key to my revenge. I had studied every schematic, every line of maintenance logs, and every legal document that granted me authority over the dam. I knew the structural stress points, the flow capacity, and the timing needed to maximize the damage without risking an uncontrollable flood. Today, I was going to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. The first signs of panic appeared as I watched a few residents emerge from their houses, staring at the encroaching water in disbelief. Some shouted, others scrambled with hoses and sandbags, but it was too late. The flood was already in motion. I remembered Pamela's face from her last confrontation, the arrogance, the contempt, her threats, her fines, her dismissiveness. She thought she could bully me, control my land, and dismiss my rights. But I was the owner of the dam, the master of the flow. I was the one who held the keys to the water. I let the dam flow gradually, ensuring the rising tide would do maximum damage, with minimal risk to my own safety. My plan was meticulous, a slow, calculated increase, enough to flood their lawns and drown their pride, but not so fast as to endanger my land or trigger a catastrophic breach. As the water level rose, I kept track of the flow rate, adjusting the valves carefully. The rain had been forecasted, but I knew the real deluge was about to come from me. I was controlling the flood, shaping the landscape of Crestwood shores into a muddy wasteland. Suddenly my phone buzzed. I checked it. Nothing. No calls from the sheriff, no warnings from the city, just the quiet, steady rise of the lake. I smiled grimly. They had no idea what I was capable of. This was just the beginning. The residents' panic grew. Pamela's house, the centerpiece of her carefully curated world, was now a swamp. Her pristine lawn was a muddy mess, her roses submerged. I saw her standing at the window, eyes wide with terror, trying to grasp what was happening. Her husband, Roger, was pacing frantically, shouting for someone to do something. But there was nothing to do. Not yet. I knew they would try to fight back, call the authorities, or perhaps attempt to shut the dam down. But I had anticipated that. I had already taken steps to ensure my control. There were backup plans, hidden valves, and ways to keep the water flowing without detection. I had played this game for years, waiting for the perfect moment. The floodwaters continued to rise, inching their way into their homes, turning the streets into rivers. I could see their panic spreading like wildfire. Their carefully built paradise was turning into chaos, and I relished every second of it. I turned away from the binoculars, walking back to my house. I had accomplished what I set out to do. The mine damage was done, and the message was clear. I was the master of Crescent Lake, and no one, not Pamela Whitmore or her HOA, could threaten my rights or my peace. But I knew better than to celebrate prematurely. The real war was just beginning. As I walked towards my porch, I glanced back at the swelling waters, a dark promise of what was to come. Crestwood Shores had pushed me far enough. Now, I was going to push back even harder. And they would learn that in this game of water and power, I always held the winning hand. Would you like me to continue with the next part? Absolutely. Here's a gripping, action-packed continuation starting right from where the previous chapter left off, diving straight into the chaos, suspense, and power struggle, crafted to be engaging, simple, and long as requested. The water kept rising, swallowing lawns and spilling over the edges of their tidy streets. Pamela's house was now a swamp, her precious roses drowned, her pristine garden gone. She stood at her front window trembling, eyes wide with disbelief, her world slipping beneath the muddy waves. Roger was barking orders, trying to grab hoses and sandbags, but it was useless. The flood was relentless, and they were powerless against it. I watched from my hilltop, hidden behind the thick brush, my fingers curled into fists. The dam had done its work, and I had made my point. But I knew better than to think this was over. Not yet. Suddenly, the loud crack of a breaking tree limb shattered the silence. A massive oak, rooted in Crestwood's front yard, was torn from its place by the rising water and crashed onto the street. Water surged around it like a wild beast, blocking their only escape route. Panic erupted as residents realized they were trapped, their homes slipping into chaos. I clenched my jaw. This was just the beginning. From behind me, my phone vibrated, violently, an incoming call. I hesitated a split second, then answered, voice cold and steady. Yes? Clara's voice crackled through the line, frantic. Ethan, it's worse than we thought. The floodwaters are spreading faster than predicted. Some of the lower houses, people are evacuating, but not everyone. Pamela's house is flooding. Her basement's gone, and she's screaming for help. On the radio, I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Good, let it flood, let them see what happens when they push too far. She hesitated. Ethan, you're crossing a line. This isn't just about property anymore. People are in danger. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. They pushed me first, I warned them. This is the cost of crossing me. Besides, I control the dam. I control the water. Let's see how long they last. The chaos outside intensified. Some residents had abandoned their cars, running through waist-high water, desperately trying to reach higher ground. Others stood, frozen, staring in horror as their world dissolved into mud and floodwater. Then I saw Pamela emerge from her house, soaked to the waist, clutching a flashlight, desperately trying to signal from her porch. She was screaming into a megaphone, calling for help, but her voice was drowned out by the roar of the flood. I stepped back into my house, watching her helplessness with a cold satisfaction. I knew she'd blame me, scream at the authorities, threaten lawsuits, but I didn't care. She had crossed a line, and now it was her turn to pay. Suddenly the ground beneath my feet trembled, a distant rumble that grew louder. I froze, eyes narrowing. Was this an aftershock? A sign of a dam breach? No, it was something else. A secondary wave, larger than expected, was coming. I rushed to the dam's control panel, my heart pounding. The flow was supposed to be steady, controlled, but something had gone wrong. The pressure was building too, fast. The sluice gates were groaning under the strain. I cursed under my breath. I'd underestimated the storm's ferocity. Or perhaps someone had tampered with the controls. My mind raced. Could I shut it down? No, not now. The damage was already done. I had set the flood in motion, and now I had to see it through. From the window, I saw the dam's spillway crack, a thin line of water forcing its way through. Then a deafening boom as the structure gave way. Concrete shattered, water exploded outward, surging into Crestwood like a tidal wave. Houses shook, trees snapped, and the floodwaters spread faster, deeper, swallowing everything in their path. I watched as Pamela's house was swept away, her screams lost beneath the thunder of rushing water. Her neighbors' cries echoed through the chaos, but I felt nothing. I had warned them. They had only themselves to blame, and yet, a part of me knew this wasn't the end. It was only the opening act, because I had one last card to play, a secret I kept hidden, one that would turn the tide even further. The dam's old schematics, the logs of my grandfather's work, all pointed to a hidden outlet, an emergency sluice that I had only recently discovered. If I opened it, I could flood the entire valley, drown Crestwood shores entirely. It was my ace, my final weapon. I moved swiftly, fingers trembling with anticipation. The control room was dark, dusty, filled with the scent of oil and old metal. I located the hidden valve, concealed behind a false wall panel, and turned it slowly. The water responded instantly, rushing through a hidden tunnel, flooding the lowlands with a destructive force that no one could stop. I watched from my hill as the entire landscape was submerged. Roads turned to rivers, trees uprooted, entire neighborhoods swallowed by the relentless flood. Crestwood's proud manicured lawns vanished beneath the dark surge, and still, the waters kept rising. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. I knew I had won, for now. But I also knew the storm was far from over. This was only the beginning of a war that would shake Crestwood shores to its core. And when they finally realized who controlled the water and who wielded true power, they would never forget it. Because in this game, water was my weapon and I was the master. Would you like me to continue with the next chapter? Certainly. Here's a powerful, suspenseful, and unforgettable ending, diving straight into the action, continuing from the previous chapter's climax, with twists and revelations that leave a lasting impression. The water was everywhere now, pouring through every crack, every hidden opening I had secretly prepared. Crestwood Shores was submerged. A dark, churning sea swallowing the streets, swallowing homes, swallowing everything that once stood proud. Silence fell over the chaos. The storm of water had claimed its prize, and I stood atop the hill, watching it all unfold. Suddenly the ground trembled again, this time more violently. I looked up, heart pounding. The dam I had controlled so carefully was cracking, buckling under the relentless pressure. I had pushed it too far. It was a race against time. Then I saw the impossible, a faint glow flickering in the distance. I squinted. A boat? No, it was something else. A light, moving fast, cutting through the floodwaters like a ghost. My eyes widened in disbelief. That was impossible. No one could survive this chaos except... My mind raced. Who could it be? The authorities? Rescuers? Or someone I hadn't expected? And then, from the shadows of the rising water, a figure emerged, clad in dark clothes carrying a small object in their hand. It was too far to see clearly, but the shape shimmered in the floodlight's flicker. A weapon? A device? Suddenly, a loud crack echoed. The dam's final support gave way. Concrete shattered. Water exploded outward in a deafening roar. The dam was collapsing, the entire structure crumbling into ruin. I was thrown to the ground, debris flying, my ears ringing. The floodwaters surged forward, unstoppable now. I scrambled, to my feet desperately trying to reach the control panel, but it was too late. The entire dam was gone, a ruin of broken concrete and rushing water. And then I saw him or her, the figure in the dark, standing at the edge of the flood, raising that small object high. It looked like a detonator. My heart stopped. No, this couldn't be. I had thought I had won, that I controlled everything. But now it seemed I was just a pawn in a larger game. The figure pressed a button, and the flood exploded outward. A wave of water, more powerful than anything I'd ever seen, surged across the valley. It tore through the neighborhood, sweeping away everything in its path. The entire town was consumed in a wall of water that rose higher and higher, drowning the last remnants of hope. I watched in horror as the figure disappeared into the darkness, the flood swallowing everything behind them. Then, in the chaos, I saw a flash, something glinting in the floodlights. It was a badge, a police badge. My mind reeled. The truth hit me like a punch. This wasn't just about revenge. This wasn't about control over a dam or a town. It was a conspiracy, a trap. The person who had appeared, who had just destroyed everything I built, was a detective, someone I knew well. Someone I trusted. Someone who had been playing me all along. My eyes darted around trying to find any sign of escape. But nothing was left. The floodwaters had won. They had devoured Crestwood Shores, swallowed my past, my plans, my secrets. And, as the water poured over what was left of the town, I realized the most shocking truth. I had been the puppet all along. The dam, the flood, the chaos, all orchestrated. The real puppet master was someone I had never suspected. The detective stepped forward from the shadows, voice cold and hollow. Ethan, you thought you controlled everything, but you were just a pawn in a game much bigger than you could understand. We needed to make sure you didn't get away with what you did. The dam was just the beginning. Your revenge was always a distraction. I stared, trembling, trying to grasp the enormity of it all. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small device. This flood was just a test. The real destruction starts now. We've set the stage for something much worse, something you can't stop. In that instant, I saw the truth. Our town, our lives, everything I fought for was just a piece in their game. They had planned this from the start. The flood was merely a distraction, a smokescreen for their real plan, something far beyond what I could imagine. And as the water continued to rise, threatening to drown everything, I realized the final, shocking truth. This wasn't just about water. It was about power, control, and a dark conspiracy that reached far beyond Crestwood Shores. And I had just become the unwitting pawn in their deadly game. The floodwaters kept rising, covering everything I loved. And in the midst of chaos, I understood one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. My fight was over. Their game had just begun. Would you like me to craft an even longer, more detailed ending, or perhaps add some additional twists?